Hello and good morning. Welcome to the 11:45 DBT class. And today we're going to be talking about, we're still in distress tolerance, and we're going to be talking about radical acceptance and turning the mind. And those are the two skills we'll be teaching today. So I'd like to start today's class off with a mindfulness activity. So just sit back, relax, close your eyes, focus on your breathing. Doesn't have to be a deep breath, doesn't have to be any particular way, just focus on your breath. And we're going to do a mindfulness activity. So breathing in, notice the pause after inhaling, which we're going to call the top of the breath. Breathing out, notice the pause after exhaling, which we're going to call the bottom of the breath. After each pause, let yourself fall into the center space within the pause. So breathe in, notice the pause at the top of the breath, breathe out. Notice the pause at the bottom of the breath. And each one of these pauses, just fall into the center space with that pause. Just be at one with the pause. In, out. Notice the pause between the in and the out. And fall into the center space of that pause. Just center yourself into the pause between the inhale and the exhale. I'll let you do that for a while. Okay, open your eyes. Come back into the room. I really like this activity. I got it from Mindfulness Handout 3A in the DBT book, if you're wondering where I got it from. It's ways to practice mindfulness. And I use this exercise a lot. If I'm at work or if I'm driving, if I'm at home, not major overwhelmed, but if things are starting to overwhelm me, or I'll listen to my breath. I'll take my breath and I'll pay attention to the pauses in between the inhale and the exhale. I just find it very relaxing and centering. Miss Cece, what did you think about the exercise? Did it center you? Did you like it? Relax. Have you ever focused on the pause in between the inhale and the exhale before?
Well, it sort of brought back some memories of a long time ago. I had forgotten about it, but it really does feel good.
Mm-hmm.
I like it.
So, if this is an exercise that you found that you like, practice it and make it part of your routine. Dropping into the pauses between inhaling and exhaling is part of my DBT routine. It's something I will go to. It's a go-to thing for me. So, for centering, for at night, if my brain is having problems shutting down, if I just drop into the pauses between inhale and exhale, it will help empty the mind a little bit for me sometimes. So that's why I do a mindfulness activity before each class, to put us in a mindfulness place and to get us centered so that we can be in the best place to learn the skills we're going to learn today. So today's skills, we're still under stress tolerance. We're still learning how to deal with that intense stress, that hits the 80 or higher. Today's concepts are radical acceptance and turning the mind. Now, radical acceptance is, I think I got a really good handle on it now, but when I first took DBT, it was a hard one to wrap my head around. It's And I'm finding what the hardest thing for me to wrap my head around, when you radically accept something, when you accept something, you accept it all the way. That little word all made the concept more difficult for me. And because I have embraced the word all, and yes, you gotta accept it all the way, all of it. For example, let me show you on the board here. Well, here's the water. Here's an iceberg. That's what you see above, but there's also the ice below. So I just don't accept the tip of the iceberg. I accept the whole iceberg. So, that little word all means all the way. Not just what we see, but everything that goes with it. So, that kind of, and then also when you're looking at all, what does all include? You see the tip of the iceberg, and that's what you tend to think of. Example, somebody dies. Okay, so we see the loss, we see the immediate grief, but all of it includes the estate, the selling of the house, the division of property, the taxes, so accepting it all. Oh my God, how many death certificates are you going to need to take care of this and that? So all of it, you think of the funeral home, the mass, the graveyard, that's the tip of the iceberg. That's what's easy to see, but all of it. So that's just an example I use, because when you think of losing a loved one, you usually don't think of all of it right away, but that's a way to think of accepting all of it. So turn the page, and I got the links to the documents we're using today. Did it post? There you go. Those are the documents we're using today. And if you click on them, you'll get to them. So the stress tolerance handout 11 right here. And radical acceptance. When you cannot keep painful events and emotions from coming your way. So, when you got to deal, like the loss of a loved one, when you cannot keep painful events and emotions from coming your way, radical acceptance. What is radical acceptance? Radical acceptance means all, A-L-L, there's that little word again, all the way, complete, and total. It is accepting in your mind and heart, in your body. It's when you stop fighting reality, stop throwing tantrums because reality is not the way you want it, and you let go of the bitterness. So that's what radical acceptance is in a nutshell. So, there's that little word, all. It's only 3 letters, but it's a big word. And you accept it, mind, heart, and body, and you don't you're not fighting reality. You're not throwing a tantrum. And because reality is not the way you want it, and you let go of the bitterness. Example, when I lost Freddie, there was a tantrum. There was all kinds of tantrums because now I'm a single parent, and how am I going to pay the bills? How am I going to live my life? How am I going to do this? How am I going to do that? Reality wasn't the way I wanted it. I never dreamt I'd be a single parent. Let go of the bitterness, like the bitterness I had to God, the bitterness I had in my spirituality, I had to let it go. So, it's when you stop fighting reality, you had to accept it. Not easy to accept. What has to be accepted in radical acceptance? Reality as it is. The facts about the past and present are the facts, even if you don't like them. So we may not like the facts, we may not agree with them, but we accept them. And the facts are the who, what, when, and where. Let me write that on the board because I always write that on the board. Facts equal who, what, when, and where. You don't see how and why there. How and why is subjective. You want the facts. So, and you might not like the facts. There are limitations on the future for everyone, but only realistic limitations need to be accepted. Everything has a cause, including events and situations that cause you pain and suffering. And what has to be accepted? Life can be worth living, even with painful events in it. So yes, you lose the loss of a loved one. Yes, a tornado comes through and tears your house to the ground. Life can be worth living. Life is still worth living, even though those painful events happened. So that's what has to be accepted. The third thing about radical acceptance: why accept reality? Rejecting reality does not change reality. Changing reality requires first accepting the reality. Pain can't be avoided. It is nature's way of signaling that something is wrong. That's why we have pain, to know something is wrong, to take care of something, whether it be our soul, our spirituality, or I fall down, scrape my knee. There's the pain. I need to take care of my knee. So it's our way of telling us something's wrong. Rejecting reality turns pain into suffering. So if I choose to ignore reality, I'm suffering for it. I am choosing suffering, and choosing suffering isn't going to help me move forward. Refusing to accept reality can keep you stuck in unhappiness, bitterness, anger, sadness, shame, or other painful emotions. Attaching to the past, attaching to the event, attaching even to an emotion, it keeps us stuck in that moment. You need to release the past, and you can't cling to the future. You need to be in the moment. Acceptance may lead to sadness, but deep calmness usually follows. The path out of hell is misery. By refusing to accept the misery that is part of climbing out of hell, you fall back into hell. So yeah, you're going to be miserable. You lost someone you loved, but that's part of the what happens. And when it comes to losing someone, they say time heals all wounds. No, I'm not going to say time heals all wounds. Time lets you learn how to cope, to deal with the loss you have. Time gives you the space and ability to learn how to deal with your loss, to learn to live with the acceptance. So it doesn't heal the wound per se, because my significant other 31 years ago, and I can still cry like a baby of day one sometimes if the situation strikes right. So, radical acceptance. So we went over what it is, accepting it all the way. What has to be accepted, reality, the who, the what, the when, and the where. And why accept reality? So that we're not clinging to the past, so that we can move on. And, like I said, part of the path out of hell is through misery. So why accept reality? So that's the first page. Cece, did the first page say anything to you? What do you?
It just puts everything in perspective that in order to live, you have to accept.
Right.
And if you don't accept, you're really becoming stagnant and life's passing you by.
Right. And the one of the core concepts of mindfulness. I mean, I talk about practicing mindfulness and be mindful, but if you don't have acceptance with being mindful, you really aren't exploring mindfulness and being the most mindful you can be. So acceptance is a part of just your everyday mindfulness. So, but we're talking about radical acceptance here. So radically accepting something. So if you turn the page to handout 11A, which looks like this. What radical acceptance is not. Radical acceptance is not approval. It's not compassion. It's not love, passivity, or against change. Example, I lost Freddie. That's not approval of the loss. It's not compassion for the loss. Oh, I definitely don't love the loss. And it's not passivity, and it's not against change. So, I accept he's gone. I accept he's no longer part of my daughter's life, or I accept that he's no longer part of any of the family or friends he used to have, So, but that doesn't mean I approve of it, I'm not passive about it. I still had a baby that had to learn about family, that had to learn about, I moved on, I did things. So that's what radical acceptance is not. Factors that interfere with acceptance. And some of the factors that can interfere is you don't have the skills for acceptance. You don't know how to accept really painful events and facts. Something can happen and you just don't even know how to process it. Part of that could be when something major does happen, we tend to dissociate a little bit. It's part of it allows our body to deal with what's going on. So you might not have at your hand the skills at that moment to deal with it. Give yourself time to say, yes, this happened. And so hopefully you can grab your skills. Another factor that interferes is you believe that if you accept the painful event, you're making light of it or you're approving of the facts, and that nothing will be done to change or prevent future painful events. And once again, with things that can interfere, you got to realize that radical acceptance is you're not approving of the facts, and nothing will be done to change or prevent future painful events. Painful events are still going to happen. So, once again, you got to ground yourself into the reality, and you're not giving permission or approval for what just happened. Another factor that interferes is emotions get in the way. Unbearable sadness, anger at the person or group that caused the painful event, rage at the injustice of the world, overwhelming shame about who you are, guilt about your own behavior. And sometimes you can have really tense emotions, and sometimes those tense and your emotions are valid. Don't get me wrong. What you do with those emotions is what counts. And sometimes you got to let the emotion out. Cry, do the ugly cry. Rage at God if you need to rage at God. Oh, my poor teddy bear, he's heard it all. And only after I was able to get that emotion out, at the high emotion level, I couldn't accept. I couldn't, but I had to get that out. So express that emotion so that you can go on to acceptance. So that's what radical acceptance is not. Like I said, it's not approval, compassion, love, passivity, or against change. And we talked about the factors that can interfere with the acceptance. The emotion might just be too high and you got to do something with it. It's not your proving of something that happens, and you don't have the skills for the acceptance. You might not know how to accept really painful events. You've never experienced it before in your life, so it's something new to you. So, you have any comments on this page, Miss Cece?
No.
Okay. All right. So, the next worksheet, which is handout 11B, is practicing radical acceptance step by step. So the first thing you do is observe that you're questioning or fighting reality. It shouldn't be this way. So observe that's happening. The next step in radical acceptance is to remind yourself that the present reality is just as it is and cannot be changed. It happened. It is what it is. You can't undo it. Remind yourself there are causes for the reality. Acknowledge that some sort of history led up to the very moment. Consider how people's lives have been shaped by a series of factors. Notice that given these causal factors and how history led up to the moment, this reality had to occur just this way. Example, I was in a wreck in 2008. And I have no recollection of the wreck, by the way. But and I was put in a hospital for a week. I was in Drake Center for 3.5 weeks. I had to live with my sister and brother-in-law's family for almost 3 months to recuperate. Acknowledge the history led me to that moment. It led me to that wreck, and my life was shaped by those factors of being extremely fragile. I mean, I had 27 broken bones and et cetera and whatnot. So, this really, and it had to, and for whatever reason, the wreck had to occur. I didn't have no control over it. It occurred. It's part of who I am. Practice accepting the whole self, mind, body, and spirit. Be creative in finding ways to involve your whole self. Use accepting self-talk, but consider using relaxation, mindfulness of your breath, have smiling and willing hands while thinking about what feels unacceptable. Prayer helps. Going to a place that helps bring you to acceptance, or using imagery. These are all things you can do to help you practice radical acceptance. Positive self-talk goes a long way, and I use it a lot. I use it for a lot of things. Relaxing your mind and body. Doing paired muscle relaxation, breathing in, tensing the muscle groups, relaxing them. It relaxes your mind and body so you can grasp on to accepting that really hard situation a little bit better. Radically accepting something all the way isn't going to be easy, and you may have to radically accept it over and over again. But, and that's okay. Just because you accepted it once doesn't mean you don't have to re-accept it again. Another way to practice radical acceptance step by step is to practice opposite action. List all the behaviors you would do if you did accept the facts. Then act if you already accepted the facts. Engage in behaviors that you would do if you really had accepted the facts. Going back to the loss of a loved one, the whole going through the layout, the cemetery, and etc., is practicing opposite action. Because and yes, I did write down, call the funeral home, and what time do we meet with the funeral home, meet with the priest, meet with the floor. These were stuff I wrote down. I had a list. I had a to-do list of stuff. I was practicing opposite action. I was being acceptance of the fact that I lost my father and I had to go forward and make these things happen. So engage in the behaviors that you would do if you really had accepted. I was accepting the loss of my father and I had to go through the motions to do, to keep going. Cope ahead with events that seem unacceptable. Imagine in your mind's eye believing what you don't want to accept. Rehearse in your mind what you would do if you accepted what seems unacceptable. Another thing about practicing radical acceptance is attend to body sensations as you think about what you need to accept. Is your stomach getting tied up in knots? Are you tensing up your shoulders? Are you is your breathing increasing because you're getting fearful about possibly losing someone again, or abandonment issues are brought up? So attend to the sensations you think about what you need to accept. Acknowledge that life can be worth living even when there is pain. Yes, life is worth living even when there is pain, because as we just said, pain lets us know there's something wrong and we need to attend to it, be it be it our soul, be it our the tension we feel, be it, or the outer, and we scraped up our knee or something. So pay attention to the pain and work with it to improve it. Do a pros and cons if you find yourself resisting practicing acceptance. And we did pros and cons the very first week of distress tolerance. And that was when you made the list of, let me go to, that was when you made, whoops, I'm in the wrong, there we go. That was when you made the graph, and you did a pros and cons of resisting, made the graph, and you had pros and cons, and you had resisting the urge, and you had acting on the crisis urge. So pros and cons is something that you tend to do ahead of time. Pros and cons is something you would do in the middle of the crisis. So if you know something's coming up, do a pros and cons about it. So do a pros and cons even if you find yourself resisting practicing acceptance. Example of how I use pros and cons. I know I keep going back to death, but it's the easiest way. It's the most, it's painful, and it's radical acceptance. It seems to work for me. But when my dad had a stroke, I was sitting there in between waiting for the doctors to come, and I knew it was bad. I knew I was going to have to consider. Well, my sister was involved too. I had to keep my sister in the loop. I knew, I lost the word. What do you call it when you have people, respite, what do you call it? What do you call it when, before you die, you have,
The respiration.
no, the people who come, care, hospice care. Thank you. Wow, hospice care. I knew I was going to have to consider hospice. I knew, and for me, it was the pros and cons. The hospice in the my pros and cons was hospice at home versus hospice in the nursing home. And as much as dad would have liked to have been at home. It would have been comfortable for family to have been at home. But the reality was radical acceptance. Reality was the house wasn't set up for hospice to happen at home. The bedroom wasn't big enough. The living room wasn't big enough to accompany a hospital bed. So, I was doing pros and cons in my head, to help me practice acceptance of what I needed to do for my dad for hospice care. And so that's an example of using pros and cons for practicing radical acceptance step by step. And so radical acceptance, like I said, isn't easy. You're accepting something that's really painful to you. You're accepting something that's really hard. Another thing I had to radically accept when I chose to go on disability, when I chose to leave my job, and I had to radically accept that I was leaving a former identity behind. I had to radically accept that my income was now vastly different. How am I going to deal with that? Once again, I was doing pros and cons. Can I live with the new income structure? Can I change and make a new support system and stuff like that? So, radical acceptance isn't easy, and there's going to be struggle and there's going to be pain, but you take care of the pain so you don't suffer. Because if you're suffering, you're stuck. Suffering is not dealing with the situation. So those are different ways to help you practice radical acceptance step by step. Miss Cece, what do you have to, radical acceptance step by step?
Well, the basic thing is it's usually in a crisis situation.
Yes, it is a crisis situation.
You can only be prepared so much for a crisis situation.
Right.
But the steps that you take can save you a lot of pain and suffering. Or
right.
Whomever's involved, it can relieve a lot of pain and suffering.
Right. And radical acceptance can relieve a lot of pain and suffering, a lot of internal pain and suffering. And by you dealing with the situation, hopefully, on those around you, they can see you dealing with it and go on. But and like I said, radical acceptance isn't something, that just because you radically accept it once doesn't mean you don't have to radically accept it again 5 minutes later. When Freddie was gone, no longer part of my life. I'd radically accept he wasn't going to go through that door and yell, "Honey, I'm home." And I was radically accepting that many times a day. That was pain. Now I could have chose to cling to that pain and loss and suffer with it, or I could keep radically accepting it's not going to happen and move on and go. So you have to accept over and over again, and that's okay. And like I said, radical acceptance, the big thing with radical acceptance, before we move on to the next skill, is accepting it all the way. I erased my little iceberg, but you have to accept the tip of the iceberg and the bottom of the iceberg, all of it. All is a 3-letter word. It's only 2 letters, ALL, but it can be that little word can be a big concept for you to deal with. And we're dealing with the facts, the who, what, when, and where. So it's accepting the facts of the situation. And so that's what I have to say about radical acceptance. Ms. Cece, as we go on to the next skill, you have anything else you want to say about radical acceptance?
No, there's going to be a couple of times in life. Well, death is probably the most radical.
Right.
And that's something that people just don't like to deal with, nor do they like to talk about it when they've got time to make plans.
Right.
But I know I've got my stuff done, and I feel so much better that I've got all my things done for the end of life.
Right. The planning of the what you think for your friends, your family around you.
It's a loving gesture about this country, because in other countries they're not this way. It becomes a part of life. And this is when the radical acceptance is really important, because there's no way you can get around it.
Right. And I know we talked death a lot, but radical acceptance, you had a stroke and you now can't do what you used to do. You have to go through speech therapy again, radically accepting that. I was in a wreck. I couldn't walk for 3 months. I had to relearn how to walk. I had to relearn how to take a shirt up and over my head. Couldn't do that for the longest. I'd accept those things and not dwell on it, that I couldn't do it, but that I will do it again. So radical acceptance, not just death, stroke, heart attack, loss of a job. Oh my God, we have a pandemic. Radical acceptance. Now we have to accept 6 feet apart and wearing masks in public places. We have to accept, and what are the facts? So we got to stick with the facts. So it is more than death. It's just that death is the one common thing that we tend to identify with most. Radically affected, you had a stroke, and now you got to relearn to walk. You got to relearn to talk. So radical acceptance pops up in a lot of different places. Radical acceptance in buying a house. Oh my God, you think you're going forward, and then you need another piece of paper, because they need that to verify God knows what for the umpteenth time. But you take a deep breath, you accept it, and you go forward. Because if you don't, there's going to be suffering, and you're not going to go forward with purchasing your house. So, radical acceptance can happen in very many things. And like I said, the key word to radical acceptance is accepting all. Very little word, but big implications. So that's radical acceptance. If you have any questions about radical acceptance, please post online. I will respond. Call here. I'm glad to talk about it. Like I said, it's a hard thing to wrap your head around, but it's definitely it's definitely a very useful skill. It keeps you from being stuck. It keeps you from suffering. So radical acceptance is a good skill. So the next skill we're going to talk about is turning the mind. And I like turning the mind. And turning the mind, like radical acceptance, is something we can do over and over again. And when I draw my little diagram of radical acceptance, okay, we got decision A here. And we got decision B here. And here we are. I'll draw my little stick person. We're right in the center. Where are we going to go with decision A? We're going to go with decision B. And for this example, let's just make it, we want to quit smoking cigarettes. Okay? Because we're seeing it, we don't like what it's doing to us. We don't like, so over here we got quit. And over here we have just one more. Oops. So I'm going to quit smoking. And I'm going down decision A, quit smoking. And I quit, and I haven't smoked. An hour's gone by, 2 hours have gone by, 4 hours have gone by. I'm good. I'm on this quit road. And let's say somebody cuts me off on the road. They didn't merge right. And I'll be darned if that didn't just get me to just one more cigarette. Well, maybe I do that just one more cigarette. Well, that doesn't mean I was bad. It doesn't mean I was wrong. I just did that one more, but we're going to go back to the quit road again. I already put 4 hours in. I was 4 hours clean. I can do 4 hours again, and I can keep going further down that quit road. And, and then we do make it further before we go back to that just one, or maybe we don't. But the fact remains, we keep turning our mind toward the positive. We keep turning our mind toward the goal we want. And as we practice going toward the goal we want, hopefully we make it a habit and we succeed in what we want to do. But just because we come back and we do this one more doesn't take away from the time we've just spent on doing well. Example, you're doing well, and you fall down. And then you do well, fall down. And you notice I'm falling down, but I'm never falling down to where I began. We start here, but we never fall down to where we began. So we're still ahead, even when we fell down and got back up and go again. So we're getting better. We're turning our mind and let's stick to our guns on quitting smoking. I mean, we can do it. So that's, an example of turning the mind. And let's go over what the worksheet has to say about turning the mind. So turning the mind. Turning the mind is like facing a fork in the road. You have to turn your mind toward acceptance road and away from the road of rejecting reality. Turning the mind is choosing to accept. The choice to accept does not itself equal acceptance. It just puts you on the path. So I chose to quit smoking. It does not mean that I have accepted quitting smoking, because who knows, somebody might cut me off and be like, oh my God, I need that fix. I need that one more cigarette. And that's taking me away from the path of acceptance. But I can choose to come back to the acceptance. So the choice to accept does not equal acceptance. It just puts you on the path. And it's okay if you divert from the path, you can go back to it. So turning the mind step by step. Observe that you're not accepting. Look for anger, bitterness, annoyance, avoiding emotions, saying, why me? Why is this happening? I can't stand this. It shouldn't be this way. I can't stand that I'm short of breath. I can't stand that I'm addicted to nicotine. I can't stand that I'm harming my body. I can't stand the damage I'm doing to myself. So you're angry, so you're not accepting of your habit of smoking. Go within yourself. Step 2 for turning the mind, go within yourself and make an inner commitment to accept reality as it is. The reality is, I want to be a non-smoker. The reality is, I want to live a healthier lifestyle. The reality is, I want to treat my body better. So you make the inner commitment to the acceptance path. Do it again, over and over. Keep turning your mind to the acceptance path each time you come to the fork in the road where you can reject reality or accept it. So, okay, we're talking about the dude who just cut us off in front of the road. We're there. I can accept to my goal to keep not smoking, or I can reject it and have that one more cigarette. Maybe this time I didn't have that one more cigarette and I kept going down the acceptance path. Yay for me. So do it again over and over. Keep turning your mind to the acceptance each time you come to the fork in the road. And you can come to that fork in the road often, many times. So develop a plan. The last step, develop a plan for catching yourself in the future when you drift out of acceptance. So I was talking about how a car might cut you off and trigger you, or you had a really good meal and you just want to finish it off with that cigarette. Are you going to reject your acceptance path, or are you going to stick to the acceptance path? You'll find yourself at that point in the road, at the turning point, many times. And it's up to you to go to the acceptance road. But let's say, like I said before, just because you choose rejection doesn't mean you've lost the advantage of all the other times you've accepted. The more you accept that one act of going down the rejection path doesn't mean you failed. It's just one act of rejection. You go back to the acceptance path and keep going. So that's turning the mind. Do you have anything to say about the worksheet? Cece? Self-explanatory?
Because it's either or.
Yep, it's either or, and you can come back to it time and time again. That's how you use turning the mind. And turning the mind is an acceptance skill because you're choosing to accept something. It's not radical acceptance per se. So, today's skills both deal with acceptance, radical acceptance, and turning the mind. And they are both skills you may have to do over and over again. You may have to accept the facts over and over again in radical acceptance. You may have to accept your choice over and over again for acceptance, and that's just part of normal life. So those are the two skills we have today, turning the mind and radical acceptance. The two sheets that follow that I linked they're in the link in the comments, are a worksheet on radical acceptance and what radical acceptance is and what you need to do to work through radical acceptance. And then I have a worksheet for turning the mind. And if you want to practice those throughout the week to help you practice radical acceptance and to help you practice turning the mind, please do so. I present these skills with hopes that, one, when I explain the skill, it makes sense, and two, that you'll take the skill and use it for yourself. If you have questions, please leave a comment. You can also reach me here at 513-241-1411. You can also reach me at maryh@recoverycenterhc.org. And I will help you with these skills. And I thank you for your time. I thank you for putting the effort into learning something new. And I hope to see you guys next week. Bye.
That time went by fast.
Yep, it was 40.